How repetition created belief. At first, it meant nothing, because a single experience rarely feels convincing, especially in a world where survival depends on reacting fast rather than trusting patterns. To understand how repetition created belief, we must return to a time when early humans treated every event as isolated, when storms, hunts, and dangers were faced one moment at a time, without assuming that what happened before would happen again. The mind in this earliest state did not generalize. It responded. Each encounter with the world was processed as a discrete event, disconnected from what came before and offering no guarantee about what would come after. The world felt unpredictable. One successful hunt did not guarantee the next. One safe night did not promise another. Experience existed, but trust did not. Then something subtle began to change as humans noticed that some events repeated, not perfectly, but often enough to feel familiar. Certain paths led back to water. Certain seasons brought animals. Certain actions produced similar results. The recognition of recurrence was itself a cognitive achievement, requiring the mind to hold multiple memories in parallel and detect the thread of similarity running through them. At first, these repetitions were simply noticed, not believed. Memory registered them, but doubt remained, because a single failure could erase confidence built from many successes. The mind was cautious by design. Evolution had shaped it to weigh threats more heavily than rewards, and a pattern that failed even once carried disproportionate weight against one that succeeded many times. But repetition kept returning. The same sound before danger, the same plant easing pain, the same ritual followed by rain. Each repeat strengthened expectation, not because it proved truth, but because it reduced uncertainty. What happened once could be coincidence. What happened again felt suggestive. What happened many times began to feel reliable. The threshold between coincidence and pattern is not fixed. It shifts according to the stakes involved and the emotional state of the observer. But consistently, across all human experience, repetition pushed perception past that threshold. This was not logic yet. It was comfort. Repetition made the world feel less chaotic. It offered predictability in a landscape that rarely showed mercy. The mind began leaning on familiarity, trusting what it had seen before simply because it had seen it before. This trust was not rational in the formal sense. It was experiential. The brain cataloged outcomes and weighted its expectations accordingly, creating an internal model of reality that was shaped more by frequency of experience than by understanding of mechanism. Belief did not appear suddenly. It accumulated, and once repetition began shaping expectation, humans started building their understanding of reality not on single moments, but on patterns that felt safe to trust. That was the moment belief quietly took root. As repetition continued, it began reshaping how humans interpreted reality, because once something happened again and again, it stopped feeling accidental and started feeling meaningful. The transition from noticing repetition to attributing meaning to it was gradual but transformative. Meaning is not inherent in recurrence. It is projected onto recurrence by a mind that finds comfort in explanation. The mind began connecting events across time. A successful hunt after the same preparation felt intentional. Safety following a familiar path felt earned. Repetition slowly transformed memory into expectation. What had been a record of the past became prediction about the future. And predictions carry emotional weight that memories do not. This expectation changed behavior. Humans returned to the same places, repeated the same actions, and avoided what had failed before. Familiarity became guidance. Novelty became risk. The behavioral shift was conservative by nature, favoring the known over the unknown, and the repeated over the novel. Over time, repetition created confidence. Actions that worked before were trusted again, even when conditions changed. The past began informing the present automatically. This automaticity was itself a form of belief, as the mind no longer questioned whether the pattern would hold. It assumed it would. This is where belief began forming without evidence. Repetition felt like proof, even when cause and effect were unclear. The mind preferred patterns to uncertainty because patterns reduce fear. The emotional reward of predictability was so powerful that it overrode the cognitive discomfort of not understanding why a pattern existed. Rituals emerged from this process. Actions repeated not because they were understood, but because they felt reliable. Success reinforced repetition. Failure was explained away or ignored. The human tendency to maintain belief in the face of contradictory evidence has deep roots in the emotional architecture of repetition. Groups share these patterns. Collective repetition strengthened belief socially. When many people repeated the same behavior, doubt faded faster. The social validation of shared practice added another layer of reinforcement, making belief feel not just personally justified but collectively confirmed. But repetition also created blindness. New information was resisted. Unexpected outcomes were dismissed. Belief hardened as familiarity deepened. The very mechanism that had made the world feel predictable now made it resistant to revision. The mind began mistaking consistency for truth. And once repetition felt safe, questioning it felt dangerous. As belief hardened through repetition, it began shaping identity and power, because once patterns feel true, they stop being questioned and start being defended. Groups formed around shared repetitions. Customs emerged. Traditions stabilized behavior. Doing things a familiar way became a sign of belonging, while deviation felt threatening. The social function of shared belief extended beyond coordination into identity formation. To participate in the group's repetitions was to declare membership. To question them was to risk exclusion. Repetition turned expectation into norm. Norms turned into rules. Rules gained moral weight. What had once simply worked became what was considered right. The transition from practical repetition to moral imperative happened gradually, as the emotional comfort of familiar patterns was translated into language of obligation and correctness. This process created authority. Those who preserved repetition gained influence. Elders, leaders, and storytellers protected familiar patterns because stability felt safer than uncertainty. Authority derived from repetition was self-reinforcing, as the authority figure's endorsement of a pattern further validated it. But repetition also froze understanding. When outcomes changed, belief resisted adjustment. Failures were blamed on people, not patterns. Doubt was framed as danger. The rigidity of belief formed through repetition became a liability in changing environments, where conditions that originally produced a pattern no longer applied. Over time, repetition shaped reality more than evidence. What everyone believed felt more real than what actually happened. Comfort outweighed accuracy. The collective confidence produced by shared repetition created a social reality that could persist even when it contradicted physical reality. This created conflict between experience and expectation. When reality broke the pattern, fear followed. Humans doubled down on belief instead of re-examining it. Yet repetition also carried survival value. Patterns often worked. Familiar actions reduced risk. Belief built cohesion and coordination. The benefits of shared belief and functional patterns were substantial enough to justify the cognitive costs of occasional rigidity. This was a paradox. Repetition created belief that could protect or blind, unify or trap. And once belief took hold, letting go of it felt like stepping into chaos. The climax of repetition, creating belief, was not certainty, but commitment. Because once humans repeated something enough times, they stopped asking whether it was true and started acting as if it had to be. Belief became a foundation for behavior, identity, and decision-making. Repetition turned patterns into expectations, expectations into rules, and rules into meaning. The familiar felt safe. The unfamiliar felt wrong. What was repeated shaped what was trusted. This is why belief can outlive evidence. Even when conditions change, repetition leaves emotional residue. Letting go of belief feels like losing stability, not just changing an idea. Yet belief built through repetition also made civilization possible. Shared routines coordinated groups. Traditions preserved knowledge. Familiar patterns allowed cooperation at scale. The danger was never belief itself. It was forgetting how belief began. Repetition does not guarantee truth. It guarantees comfort. And comfort can be mistaken for certainty. Even today, the same process continues. What we see often, hear often, and repeat often begins to feel real, regardless of accuracy. Repetition still shapes belief, and belief still shapes the world we live in. So what do you think? Are we choosing our beliefs, or are we repeating them? How